This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, anyone, any questions that I can take? And firstly, did you all go ahead, try out branching policy, create your own branches, and did you all go ahead and import the code, or did you all go ahead and commit the code out here? So
Yeah,
this is where we are. Yes, on this particular repository, I have the code, and this is the code that I do have out here right now, called as this one. And also, I have a branching policy so that no one can go ahead and let's say commit to this one directly out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here? Again, I don't need these branches. So I'll delete these branches. I don't even need this branch. So I'll make sure my repository is a little clean and I'll delete all these branches out here. Again, how did I do this? I went ahead, downloaded this particular code, commented it out, pushed it back into my repository using a pull request. So I went ahead, did a pull request out here, and all the code is now sitting inside my repository. And very importantly, this this code has the application. So all this is your application. You have the startup files, you have the code generator, you have multiple things out here, and you also have some test cases. We'll see how do we, let's say, use these things out in order to, let's say, go ahead and perform end-to-end operations out here as such. Yes. Anyone? Any questions till here? Anyone? Any questions that I can take till you?
Kiran, one basic question. Actually, I got confused yesterday.
Okay.
Uh, when we clone this content
Mm-hmm.
to our local system, we can able to see
Okay.
the split screen. We can able to see one is that local system and another is this Azure one.
Sorry, one is the, can you come again, please?
Uh, one that's split screen we can able to see, no. So in that
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
left is the local system and right is this cloud uh, platform, right?
Not really. It's a
Okay,
split screen when you go ahead and do a commit. So left is the file without commit, right is the file after
uh,
the commit. So it's just telling before commit and after commit. So you won't be able
okay.
to see the system on the remote.
Oh, got it. So stage changes in the sense it is admitting.
These stage changes to be committed. So you are just preparing the changes that needs to be committed. That is called staging. It's called
Okay,
as a
so both.
staging area. Mhm.
Okay, so both the screens what we are seeing is from the local system only.
Yes, from the local system only. The different versions of your file on your local system.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Is any more questions, guys? And do we have all the code? So we need to have a repository. We need to have, let's say, branches in the repository. So repos. And then we need to have a branch in the repository. Branch needs to be protected. When I say branch needs to be protected, I need a policy on that particular branch. So branch, and I need a policy on that particular branch. All my developers are now forced to go ahead and, let's say, comment the code using a pull request. This gives me a great advantage to do a revert, to review my code before I go ahead and, let's say, commit out and so on and so forth out here such. And after this, I am now going towards a pipeline service, which is taking all the code that is there inside your branch and then building it out. It's trying to build that particular code. So let's go and get a pipeline diagram. But before I do this, we'll understand what kind of a steps do I need to perform manually so that I can go ahead and let's say replicate the same thing using an Azure cloud. So I want to understand what are all the steps that we do manually out here on this particular code so that we can replicate the same thing. Let's say once we go there. So what do we do, guys? How do we go ahead and do this manually? Can anyone tell me what kind of steps we perform manually out here? Can anyone tell me if I give you this code and ask you to build the code, how do you build the code? How do you go ahead and build the code?
We'll open it in the Visual Code and we will there we will.
Just you go into the Visual Studio. So you need to have a code. So to build a code, this is what you need, or these are all the things that you need. Can I say you need the code? Can I also say even before you need a code, you'll need a laptop or an infrastructure, a desktop, something like that, operating system, then the code, then tools like what? Visual Studio. Go ahead and do a build of your code. So let me see. Let me first go into the folder and let's see, where is my repository Android 2 code. This is all my code that I do have right now. I can go ahead, click on Visual Studio, open this particular code, and I do two things. I initially say build, then I go ahead and do a publish. This is what I've done. Now I'm also telling that okay, fine, before doing a publish, I also want to go ahead and see, or I also want to, let's say, go ahead and run some test cases on this particular code, because if I want to understand how my code is really performing, I need some tests to run on it, and that test will give me the idea whether the code is running fine or not. And these test cases, right? You see a project called random codes.tests. These test cases are given to me by a QA. Now QA is telling, okay, fine, I've written all these test cases. Take it, do whatever you want with this. I'll say, okay, fine, great. Now, when I go ahead, click on the Visual Studio and say build, there are two things that happen in the background. In order to do a build, right, the Visual Studios that is installed on my local system needs to communicate with my operating system telling that please go ahead and try to do a build. Please go ahead and try to compile the code. The operating system will say, yes, I will help you with the compilation, provided I have a software to compile it. Provided I have a software to compile it. And that's where Microsoft gives you a software called a .NET SDK, Software Development Kit. It's a kit to go ahead and, let's say, build that particular language, test that particular language, or test all the code that is written in that particular language, and so on and so forth. And whenever I install the Visual Studio internally went ahead and installed me all those SDKs. So if you go into my C drive of the system, go into program files, something called .NET, and I have something called SDK. I have an SDK called .NET 6. If you don't have this, you can simply go here, say .NET SDK download. And if you see this, right, you have SDKs out here that you can go and download. All these other versions, you can go download, install these SDKs out here. These SDKs, software development kits, they go ahead and help you to, let's say, do a build, to test, to publish your code and all that stuff. Now, this is specific to .NET. Now, if you are a developer who's working on Java, you have something called Java JRE, Java Runtime Environment, Java JDK, Java Development Kit. So you have all these kits that you can go ahead and use in order to, let's say, compile a specific language out here. So see, your Visual Studio is just an interface. It's just a GUI. It's a interface out here, which when you go ahead and click on build, right, in the background, it is going ahead and using that particular SDK. It's running a command called .NET build. Go ahead and build this out and giving you a file out here as such. And very importantly, guys, see, build is not a straight, or build is not, let's say, a straightforward step out here. Build internally has multiple things. Like when I say build, I am talking about two different steps out here. First step is called restore. Second step is called as a build. What do I mean by a restore? Is very simple. See, if you look at a code, right, and if you look at, let's say, the CS project file out here, let's look at that particular CS project file. Again, I have two different projects out here, and this is my CS project file. And if I just expand this file, right, see, there is something called as code properties. For example, For this code to properly run, I need to have something called as a .NET 3.1 SDK installed on my system. Also, there is something called tool reference. It's telling there is something called a web code generator tools, and there are multiple tools out here. There are multiple references that my code is, let's say, referring to. And also, if I go into something like my app settings and all that stuff, I have multiple things out here, and I have multiple, let's say, dependencies for my code. Meaning, see, this code should go ahead and generate some random codes. So it's a random code generator. So this code will go online, talk to, let's say, some packages and try to generate some, let's say, codes out here for you. In order for this code to work, all those references that you see here, right, inside your this particular file, all these references should first be downloaded. All these references should first be downloaded and made readily available. And that download process, in a technical terminology, we call it as .NET Restore. It's called restoring code dependencies. When you work in a real-time environment, you might have multiple code dependencies that you need to restore. So what does Visual Studio do in the background is very simple, guys. Let me go back into that particular junk folder. Let me go into the code. And what I'll do is that whichever path my code is running in, I'll click on that path window. I'll say CMD and I'll open my CMD console. So Visual Studio in the background is doing the same thing. So the first command Visual Studio will run, it'll tell, okay, fine, .NET space restore. Now to restore the dependencies. And if I do this, yes, it's telling no specific file was found. Reason being, I need to go inside this and I need to give it one specific file here to restore out here. So if I now go and say .NET space restore, it's now understanding, okay, fine, it's telling what are the projects to restore. It's restoring those projects out here. It's telling, okay, fine, these are the projects that are restored. So I've restored all your dependencies. After a restore, Visual Studio will go ahead and run a command called .NET build. As and when I do that, it's going to go ahead and say, okay, fine, .NET build. I'll go ahead and run the build for you. And it's telling all this is now built out here. Done. After that, before I go ahead and give you the code is built right now. Before I give you the published version of the code, I'll just come back. There's something called tests. I'll now open the CMD here. And I'll now run a command called .NET test in order to see how my test cases are actually running. Now you see, it's telling there is one test is there, and I'm running that particular test, a very simple test. It's telling the test is passed. So it's running a test on top of your code. It's calling the test cases that a QA has given to you, and you're running the test. And finally, what I'll do is I built it out good, but I need a final version of my code. When you're doing it with Visual Studio is taking care of everything. It's a simple, let's say, one click button. It's doing again, going in and doing all these things for you. But when you're doing this, so I did a build. Finally, I ran a test, and then I'll do something called as .NET publish to produce a publishable version of my code. I'll say enter. So I did a test and all that stuff, and finally, you see I have a publish folder here telling yes, the code is published. I'll copy this out. This is all the publishable version of my code, meaning this is all the combined version of, or my compiled version of my code. So it's all a compilation. In order to achieve this without Visual Studio, the reason I'm coming without Visual Studio is Visual Studio is pretty much automated. Click one button, everything will take care of it. It'll give you a published version of this code. But if you come manually and approach this out, I'm running a couple of commands, and those couple of commands are .NET restore, and I have given the path. So what I did is that when I did a restore, I'm coming into one specific folder out here because I need to point it to the CS project file of my project. I need to tell where my CS project file is there, because this CS project file will help you do a build, will help you do a restore, will help you do a publish. So I'm telling where my CS project file is there. So it's saying, okay, fine, yes, this is the CS project file, good enough. I'm pointing it out. And then I'm doing, let's say, something called as a restore. After that, I'm doing a .NET build. Then I change my directory. I'm trying to do a .NET test to understand how it is going around. Finally, I'm going ahead and doing what? .NET publish. These are all the steps that I'm doing manually. Now, if I want to automate it on the pipeline, the same order is something that I'll repeat. Restore, build, test, publish. The same order is something that I'll repeat. But before I go into a pipeline, is everyone following how am I doing manually? Before I go there into a pipeline, any confusions here on how we are achieving this manually out here as such? Yes, any questions? Yes, no, maybe. Can I move forward? Are we comfortable with this?
Kiran, this is if the code is a build and .NET application or .NET, then these all commands will work, right?
Yes.
If the code is built in some other ETL tool, Spark or something like that, we have a tools for this build?
Can you come again, please? If the code is what? I'm sorry.
Suppose I'm a ETL guy. I used Spark or Python for my
Mhm.
ETL jobs.
Yes.
And
Yes.
for build, how I can is there a tools, third party tools because for
There
this?
are, yes, there are third party tools. There are also command line that you can use. But let's say if you have Python, Python has a different command line in order to go ahead and do a build. See, the operation of the build happens the same. In .NET, it's telling .NET build. In Python, there might be a command to go ahead and do a Python build out here. So if you do a build Python code, you have multiple commands for the same thing out here to go ahead and do a build out here as such. So yes, you need the tools for it. .NET SDK cannot help you build a Python project because .NET SDK doesn't understand Python. So it cannot really help you do a Python project out here. But you need the dependencies of Python in order to go ahead and do a build. But yes, using the command line, you can do it. Using the command line, if you have the right Python tools, you can go ahead and do this out.
Yeah, basically, if the software or application will have that feature, then built-in feature, then well and good. Like if we take talent,
Yes,
we have a built-in feature called build in the talent. We
correct.
can.
Again, when you say a software has a built-in feature, in the background, it's nothing invoking a command line. It's going into let's say wherever you're running this out, it's it's invoking the command line, and in the background there are softwares that is helping you out to build it out. So I'm going under the hood. I'm telling what happens behind the scene.
It's a converting into DLL, high level to
Exactly.
DLL, low
Into
level.
DLL, yes. And to convert a code into DLL, specifically a .NET code, I'm performing all these steps called restore, build, test, and publish. Test is optional, but I would say every organization will implement some kind of a testing out here as such. Reason being, you would like to understand what is the code quality before you go ahead and let's say give your code out here as such.
So that
Yes.
we call it as automation testing, right? Which
I'm
we
sorry.
develop. That we call it as automation testing, right? Some we
Yes.
develop some scripts in Selenium or NFT.
Again, Selenium is an integration testing tool. Very importantly, these are all unit tests that I'm performing. Selenium, APM, JMeter, these are integration testing tool, which means they come into place after you deploy the code, or they also called as functional testing. They come into place after you deploy the code, not before you deploy the code. This is all
Oh,
unit testing or static code testing, which means before I mean, at the time when I'm building the code itself, I'm running some tests and I'm identifying whether my code is, let's say, performing up to the scenario, or is the code properly built? Are there any issues with the code and so on and so forth? That's what I'm trying to test, let's say, using .NET testing out here as such.
oh. I think you told that QA given the test cases, so we consider.
Exactly. So QA is doing the testing on a daily basis. He's telling you are building the code. I'm now identifying the code. Now what is QA doing is that QA is now giving the test cases. He's telling take the test cases. I'll put it inside the repository. So as a QA, I'll go ahead and put this inside the repository. Now as a DevOps, I'm trying to utilize all these things, the code and the test cases, in order to go ahead and do a build. Yes, sorry, you had a question offline. I'll just take one. Yes, go ahead. When you say downloading the code, we did that yesterday. No, firstly, when you say download the code, what do you want to do? You just want to go online, download the code? We did yesterday. We did that yesterday, didn't we? We just went ahead and we went into something called randomcodes.net. We came here and we came here. We said download. If you don't want to do manually, you can copy this URL and you can go ahead and clone the code out here. So if you want to do that, I'll also show you that. So if I just go to a new folder out here, say .NET test, something like that, I'll just go ahead, open this particular folder in CMD again, because Git is installed on my system. So I'll start with a command called git init to initialize the repository. So if you look at this, I now have a Git folder. After that, I'll say git clone, and I have the URL right. Random quotes. You can go ahead, let's say, to perform all these things out here using a command line as well. But if you have a VS Code, you can directly call it, or you can directly download this out. Shouldn't be a problem at all. Yes. Anyone? Any more questions, guys? All right. So, good. Please, sorry.
You can like you open the code and a visual code, and you have shown that property codes, and we got like libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
to need a build, to do the build, and we need that libraries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
As a DevOps engineer, we don't have that much knowledge core, right? How what
Exactly.
library required, and like
Exactly.
how we can do that, how we can how
Mm-hmm.
like all these required software installations, how will we manage as a DevOps engineer? Because
We are not installing softwares at all.
mm,
We are not installing softwares at all. All we are doing is just going in and running this particular command. That's it. Telling .NET restore. Whatever developer, it's a developer's headache. Whatever software he wants, it's a developer's headache out here. He can include it in his files, put it in my repository. My build pipeline will take care of the rest. I don't even have to know what is the thing that I'm even building out here. I don't even have to know about that. All I'm doing is that just asking the developer whatever references you want, put it in your CS project file. My build pipeline will take care of it. Very simple.
oh, okay. So we are not responsible to download all these.
No, we are not responsible for this demo. Yes, since you do not have a developer that you're working with right now, I'm just acting as a role of a, let's say, a developer, a very small development project, and I'm just going ahead and downloading this out here as such. But before we go into the pipeline, we'll need to understand what are the steps manually that we perform as a developer. What are the steps we manually perform so that we can automate it, so that we can go ahead and do a automation out here. And these are the steps: restore, build, test, and publish. These are the steps that I do. And also, in order to do these steps, in order to before run the steps, I need a laptop or some kind of a desktop, some kind of a machine. Then I need the OS, .NET SDK. Then I need your code. Then I need, let's say, these tools out here, or like Visual Studio, something like that. Again, Visual Studio being optional, I can go ahead and without Visual Studio also, I can run all these things out here as such. And these are the steps that I'm actually looking at and trying to understand how I, as a DevOps engineer, can go ahead and help my testers, and how I, as a DevOps engineer, can go ahead and, let's say, help them out in order to, let's say, automate everything. Because I'm asking them not to perform all these steps on the local machine. I'm telling, don't perform all these things, put everything in my, let's say, repository. I will take care of it. This is what I'm now telling them. Now, that is where my DevOps practice comes into picture. DevOps is a practice, guys. It's a mindset. So now what I'll do is, till now I have the code, I have all these things. This is the time where I go ahead and let's just start with a pipeline. What I'll do, pipelines, I'll click on pipelines out here. It's telling what? Create your first pipeline. You don't have anything right now. I'll say yes, go ahead, create a pipeline out here. And now it's telling where is your code? Where exactly have you hosted your code? Is it Azure repository? Is it Bitbucket Cloud? Is it GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, other Git, Subversion, wherever it is? I don't, let's say, segregate it. I don't tell that you should have your code definitely in Azure repository only. It can even be in GitHub, not a problem. And here you have something called YAML. I'll talk about that in let's say in the future classes. But what I'll do is right now I'll click on use classic editor. I'll say use a classic editor. I'll click on this one. Now it's again telling me where is your source. Select your source. Where is our code, guys? Git repositories. Which Git repository again? Which Git repository? Is it Azure Repos Git? Is it GitHub? Azure
Azure.
Repos Git. It's already there in the repository. All my code. Yes, I'll say yes. It's telling which project. 8 a.m. Which repository? Android. Which branch? Develop branch. I'll say yes. This information is correct. Continue. Now it's telling what do you want to build? What exactly do you have? Let's say someone has Python. I'll have create and test a Python package out here, a template. In my case, I have a .NET. It's telling .NET Desktop ASP.NET. If I just scroll down, there is something called what? ASP.NET Core. This is what I'm building. I'll say yes. This is what I'm actually doing. I'll say apply. Do you see what it did? Whatever I did manually, it's just going ahead and giving me all these steps. Telling restore, build, test, publish, and finally we'll talk about what publish artifacts really is. So whatever I did manually, everything it went ahead and gave me as a template, just with a click of a button. This is automation for me. This is Azure DevOps for me. I don't have to go ahead and run all these things again on the pipeline. I'm just telling, okay, fine, give me a template called ASP.NET Core. It's giving me all these steps right now. It's telling you're ready. Go ahead and do whatever you want now. But do we have everything that we need? Do we have everything? What are we missing on? What do you think we are missing on? Let's ask ourselves a couple of questions. Firstly, let's go one after the other. Do we have all the steps? Yes, I've shown you. We do have all the steps, right? We have .NET publish test and all that stuff. So I'll do a tick mark here. Do we have the code? Where is the code? Where exactly is the code?
Azure repository.
Repository.
Exactly, Azure repository. We already have the code. Now, do we have these three things? Laptop
No,
OS.NET?
No.
No,
no.
we don't have a platform. Then where will I get a platform from? Because this is important. I need to have some, let's say area or some infrastructure where I can build this out, right? And I don't have a platform right now. The question is, where do we get this platform from? Or who is going to give us this particular platform? What are your ideas? You cannot use your local laptop because it's on the cloud. Completely it's on the cloud right now. So you literally cannot go ahead and use a local laptop out here. What is the alternative? What alternative that you can think of? Any service till now that we have worked on? Any alternative service that you can use here?
App service.
As service.
App service, but app service again is a PaaS service. I don't have the, let's say, the control to go ahead, go into the system and do something, right? I don't have that particular control.
Virtual machines.
Virtual machines, yes, you can definitely use a virtual machine, IaaS service, VMs, machines that are running on the cloud, which can help me do a build. If this machine is helping you do a build, we call this as a build server. Or technical terminology for this is called as an agent. An agent helps you perform something called as a job. All this together is called as a job, guys. A job containing 4 different tasks: restore, build, test, and publish. This is what I'm coming down to DevOps. In a pipeline, you have something called as an agent. Agent is nothing but a virtual machine which is helping you perform a job. And job here is containing task 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what the agent agent is supposed to do. Now the question is that who will give you this agent? We are now coming down, or we are all accepting the fact that the agent is nothing but a VM. Who will give you this VM? Or where are you going to get this VM from?
Under the subscription we have agent, right? Azure.
Yes. Under the subscription, you can go ahead and create a VM. If you are creating a VM under your subscription, this is called as a self-hosted agent. Or you can also call it as a private agent. This is purely an infrastructure as a service. You need to go ahead again. You don't have to have, let's say, or you don't have to have this particular virtual machine running in Azure. You can have the virtual machine running in, let's say, AWS, EC2 instance, or you can have a Google engine that is running, or you can have an on-premise server. Anything is okay. But if you are getting your own agent, we call it as a self-hosted or a private agent model. If you are a small organization, you say that, you know what, I don't want to take the headache of maintaining all these servers and all that stuff. I don't want to, let's say, go ahead and take the burden of maintaining these. You can also go for a SaaS offering, software as a service, wherein you ask Microsoft that, hey, Microsoft, can you please give me some agent out here so that I can perform all these steps? Microsoft says yes. That is called as a hosted agent. 2 types of agents: self-hosted agent and hosted agent out here. And hosted agent is one of the most easiest way to go ahead and, let's say, do a build. This is what I'm getting into. I'll also come down to what self-hosted agent is, how do you configure that, and so on and so forth. But if you want Microsoft to go ahead and give you this particular hosted agent, the very first thing that you have to do is that the one that we did in the very first day of Azure DevOps. We filled up a form, remember, parallelism request. That's for getting a hosted agent. That is for actually getting a hosted agent out here. Because if I would have explained then, you would have literally not understood what a hosted agent really is. That's the reason I just said, okay, fine, go ahead, fill up this without asking any question, fill up this out. This will now come here and help you here. In order to go ahead and get an agent from Microsoft, this is what it's telling me. It's telling tasks. It's giving me an error here. And if I just scroll up, it's telling pipeline needs some attention. It's telling what is your agent pool? Meaning, what do you want to run, or what kind of an agent do you want? Is it an Azure agent or is it a private agent? Meaning hosted versus self-hosted. I'll say Azure pipelines only. Please give me some agent. Now it's telling me what is the specification, meaning what are you trying to build. Depending upon that, you have a Mac agent, Linux agent, Windows agent, multiple things out here. And I'll say I want a Windows latest. That's it. This is what I'm now telling Microsoft. And also, this is the name of the pipeline. I can say this is a .NET build pipeline, something like this. Now it's telling me, can you give me what is the path of the project you want to restore? Can you tell me where is your CS project file? I'll simply go into my repository. Here, inside this particular folder called random codes, I have a file called CS project file. This is the file it's asking me, where is the path? I'll just copy the entire path here. Remove this, paste this in. It's asking me, where is your test project? Can you give me your test project? I'll say yes, I have the test also. This is my project, which is code random tests. Under that, I have something known as a test project out here. The rest of the steps, do a restore, build, test, publish, and finally something known as a publish artifacts. We'll talk about that. What is a publish artifact and all? We'll talk about that. I'll now say save and queue. I'll give a comment telling that this is first run, save and run. Now what this is doing right now, it's just going inside whatever steps that you have performed till now manually. I am asking this to perform automatically out here. So let's see, let's refresh this out. Now it's telling, okay, fine. You have asked for an agent. So I am waiting for Azure to give you an agent. So it's telling this is the Windows latest image. And now it's telling, okay, fine. Yes, I got the agent from Azure. The name of the agent is something like this. It's nothing but a virtual machine running somewhere. Now it's doing a restore. It's telling I will go ahead, do a .NET restore, run something called as a .NET restore out here. It's telling yes, I'm running .NET restore, and it is restoring all my packages. Again, I am not even interfering with this. I'm just telling what is the path to restore. That's it. Where is your, let's say, code? Just go ahead, click on restore. I mean, just go ahead and let's say tell that restore out here. Once the restore is done, I have a build, test, publish, and publish artifacts. This is one additional step which I'll explain. But isn't this doing the same thing what we are doing, let's say, in our local machine? Literally the same thing. So now if you see, just telling, okay, fine, restore and all that stuff. Restore is done. Then I'm going ahead and doing a build. So it's telling, okay, fine, the projects are already restored. I'll do now a build out here. And after build, he'll do a test and then a publish out here as such. So it's telling, okay, fine, there are a couple of things that I'm building right now. Now, testing out here, doing a test of your project. It's telling how do I what kind of a test case that I need to run. And as a QA, they can go ahead write a number of test cases. Right now, I just have one test case. They can go ahead and let's say write number of testing scenarios, and it's telling okay, fine, yes, there is one test. Now it is what passed. So the test result here it is passed here. Now it's doing a publish. Took about 26 seconds and all that stuff. Took about less than 2 minutes in order to go ahead and do this. And again, if I just come back, I have something called test. It's telling you know what one test completed, 100% pass percentage. You can also tell if the test fails, fail my entire build pipeline out here as such. Also, it will tell you if in case your test fails, it will tell you what are the bugs in your code. Directly, it will tell you what are the bugs, and the developers can check this out and they'll say, okay, fine. These are the tests basically that I do have and all that stuff. And okay, this is test fine, not problem. So it's now telling the test is completely done. It's 100% pass. Saying yes, your tests are done, which is 100% pass rate, good enough. If your test fails, the next step will automatically fail. You won't get a published artifact at all. So this is how I'm now controlling my pipeline. So I'm creating a pipeline, changing the name, telling what is the agent on which you need to run. That's it. And I'm just executing the entire pipeline out here as such. This is how I am now going ahead doing my first pipeline, my first build pipeline. And at the end of this pipeline, right, the pipeline is expected to produce something known as an artifact. Something called as what? Artifacts. This is what the pipeline is expected to produce out here. And if I look at the results, right, so I have a test case. There's also something called what? One published, one consumed. It's telling I have consumed your repository, meaning I've utilized the code in your repository and published something called as a .zip file. And if I extract the zip file, so if I come here, download this called something called random codes.zip, and if I extract this out, All this is my published artifacts right now. All these are my DLLs. Whatever that I did manually, I'm now doing automatically and getting my DLLs out here as such. Yes, this is called as a build pipeline out here as such. Yes, any questions here? Anyone, any questions? So now my duties as a DevOps engineer are slightly expanding. Firstly, I need to create a repository. Secondly, I need to create branches of the repository. Third, I protect my branches using something called branch policies. Fourth, I also make sure to create the daily build pipelines and make it ready so that my code can be converted into a finished product, which is called as an artifact. This is what I'm doing. So at the end, I'm getting this artifact, and further I'll take this artifact, use another pipeline, release it out. We'll also see that. But before that, any questions that I can take? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here?
So to build the pipe, to build this, you used the hosted, right? Azure services, right? Right?
Correct, correct.
Not the self, right?
Not a self-hosted, no.
Only we have two options in there. One is private, one is hosted service.
Correct, correct. So
Now,
your question.
if the build fails, what is the like? Okay, okay,
It's very important to understand in which step the build fails. In which really step the build fails out here. For example, uh, I can give you a real-time example. I have a student who just messaged me in the morning telling that the build failed. So I was just looking at that. So this is his build failure. He's having some, let's say, UI test cases he's building up and all that stuff. But his build is failing at the restore. And if I click on the restore, this is what it's clearly telling me. This is the error. It's telling build failed. It's telling the .NET, the current .NET SDK targeting, let's say, .NET 6.0, either target, let's say, a lower version or something like that. Very simply, it's telling me that, you know what, when you're doing a restore, very importantly, if I just scroll all the top, this is how I troubleshoot this out. This is again pure experience, coming out with pure experience out here. So the SDK version that this particular restore is using is a .NET 5, but the code that this particular guy is using, this entire code is built on .NET 6. This entire code here is built on .NET 6. It's a .NET 6 targetable framework. So he's using a .NET 5 to target it out. That won't work. You can use a .NET 6 to target .NET 5, 3.1 and all that stuff. Backward compatibility is supported. So his pipeline is failing. And he's doing the same thing here as well. So it depends upon where, in which step is this failing. And we normally do one thing, we go into the logs. We understand the logs. We check for errors in the logs. We understand what exactly is the error. Depending upon that, we go ahead and give the resolution, telling that, okay, fine, you know what, your .NET 6 is not supporting, or my agent doesn't have that particular .NET 6. I'll have to install that on top of my agent or something like that. So it's important where it is failing and how do we troubleshoot the same thing out here as such.
In real time, if the build fails, we are responsible to share these logs to the developers to analyze, right?
The developers will have access to the logs. So
Oh,
developers will have access to the logs out there so they can check it out. And sometimes it happens that, you know what, there is no mistake of the developer. Probably I'm using an agent. So let's say I'm using a self-hosted agent and that particular agent doesn't have .NET SDK at all and it is failing. The developer is telling that, you know what, when I'm trying to build it on my local machine, it is successful. But when I'm trying to build it on the cloud, it is not. Can you please help me out with the same thing? Then depends upon, let's say, what is the error. I go ahead and troubleshoot it accordingly out here as such.
so in that case, we need to download the SDK first in our hosted services.
Exactly.
Then,
Not on the hosted services. Hosted services is a SaaS.
hmm.
It's a SaaS offering that I'm using. So hosted services, right? They come by default with all the softwares. You don't have to do anything. So for example, I'm using a Windows latest hosted services in my pipeline. So if you check this out, that's the very first step what it is doing. It's telling initialize job and it is telling yes, this is the pipeline that you are using. Operating system of the pipeline is a Windows Server 2022. So it's created a Windows Server 2022 with a private IP called 10.0.2 something. I mean, the version called something like that, not a private IP. I'm sorry. Then it's telling this is the image. So Microsoft has an image out here, and it's telling these are all the included softwares in that particular, let's say, pipeline. So it's telling these are all the softwares that we have included, which is Bash and all that stuff. .NET by default comes installed. Then you have Chocolatey, you have all these things. You have pip, so you can do also Python. You can do pip install, pip restore, and all that stuff. You have Ant, Gradle, Maven, so you can do Java, and you have all these things out like Git, Docker, and all these packages that are pre-installed. All these packets are already pre-installed out here, and it's just telling yes, all these are already pre-installed. You can just use this out. So you have Ruby and all that stuff, and with by default, Windows Agents comes with something like Server 2022 Enterprise Edition. So this server is itself going ahead and trying to, let's say, give you all the SDK packages, the .NET packages out here. So all these are now installed in the server and given it to you right away. You don't have the rights to install this out. So again, if you see .NET Core SDKs are also installed. You have 3.1 and all these SDKs that are actually installed out there on the server. Yes, any questions?
So now you have used these hosted services. You've
Correct.
done your job. You have done your
Mm-hmm.
job. Build is completed. Now,
Mm-hmm.
are you still blocking that as a virtual machine, or you are releasing? Because if you block that, you have the costing will come, right? Are you
No, there is
releasing
no
that?
costing. No, I am releasing it out as and when the pipeline is done. As and when the pipeline is done, I'm releasing this out. I'm releasing this particular service out here. That's the reason. Finally, I have something called publish artifacts. Until here, I'm working on the virtual machine that Azure has provided me. I know that once my pipeline is done, once my jobs are done, Azure will take back that particular virtual machine. That's the
By
reason
default,
I'm including one more. Yes, by default, I'm not doing anything. By default, they'll take it back. They will not give you this one. By default, they'll take it back. That's the reason I'm uploading that particular artifact that I generated from that virtual machine to my pipeline so that I can go ahead and download the same. That's the reason I had that additional step called publish artifacts. So by default, it's going to release, and also whenever you raise that request, right, that parallelism request, go into your project settings. You have something called parallel jobs. Here it's going to tell you that yes, Microsoft hosted agent, you have a parallel job, one free job, because you have gone ahead and you have given a parallelism request out here. And here it is telling me that yes, when you request, I will give you 1800 minutes per month free. I'll give you 30 hours of free time. You can utilize it, and every time your pipeline runs, let's say my pipeline ran for a minute, it will consume from this particular minutes out here as such. That's the reason we raised something called as a parallelism request.
Once the test and restore and build everything is completed, well, once you get the bug like that, the version right, as you what you have shown,
I'm
how the
sorry, can you
developer knows that?
I'm sorry, can you come again, please? Your voice is a little, let's say, muffled. So can you come again with the question again, please?
Actually, while you are building the code,
Mm-hmm.
you
Okay.
got one error, right? The
Yes.
version control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how the developer knows the what does he make the mistakes?
Because he's developed the
Actually,
code.
yeah, you know that
Because
while you are building, you know the what is the issue while showing in log, and how
mm-hmm.
developer knows that. No?
Now, while building, can you come again, please? While building,
Actually, developer develop the code and he has given to you, and you build that one.
right?
Yeah, Azure engineer. Okay, he got the error while building
Okay.
that. How the
When you say
developer
he
knows
got
that
the
one?
yes, firstly, when you say he got the error, are you telling he's getting the error in the local machine, or are you telling he's getting the error on Azure DevOps?
Azure DevOps.
Okay. So he's got the error in Azure DevOps. Yes. Go ahead with the question, please. So I'm the developer. Let's say I go into a different organization and I take a look at this particular error. So I'm the developer. I got the error. Yes, your question here is what exactly? I'm sorry. Can you come again, please?
Yeah, how the developer knows the code which I mean whatever you got the error, how the developer knows and how he can rectify that one.
This is exactly what it is telling you. It
Yeah,
is exactly telling you that your code is written in .NET 6 and you're using a .NET 5 to target it out. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. Now the developer either has to reach to a DevOps engineer telling that you know what my code is in 6, or he has to go back into his code and adjust the framework he's targeting out here as such. So how does the developer know? Because he's a developer again. How do you know a
yeah.
PowerShell script
Actually,
is failing?
I mean, how do you contact with the developer? That's my question.
So yes,
How do you?
Contact
Sucrit,
with
like
the developer.
How do you contact with the developer? Very importantly, I know which developer is running the code. It's clearly telling me that yes, this is the developer who's running the code, or the developer will contact me. How will he contact? Either using a ticketing system. If let's say there are two different teams, development team is different and the DevOps team is different, they can use ticketing like ServiceNow or Jira or something like that, and they can contact us. Or if you are a part of the same development team, you can use let's say something like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or something like that in order to let's say go and establish communications. Or better way, you can use Azure boards in order to go ahead and let's say assign work item to the DevOps engineer, telling that okay, fine, this is failing. Please engage the DevOps engineer in that way. So they can do in that way.
and also Kiran, is there a feature available like when there is a build failure, notify all the teams like client, product, development team, QA team. Like, do you have a such option here to notify, send
Yes,
an
of
email?
course. Yes, of course. We do.
Oh,
We do have that. So this code got built, right? This got built around 17 minutes ago, which is like about 8:40 or something like that. By now, I should have already received an email telling that the code got successfully built. See,
oh, the notification will be sent. Okay.
the notification will automatically be sent out, and you can configure your notifications as well in Azure DevOps. So there is something called not services notifications. So if you look at this, right, they are pre-built notifications. Whenever the build completes, please send it across. You can add your own notifications out here, telling do you want to send across a notification when the build fails, or do you want to let's say notify when someone is committed or a pull request is updated, or any pipeline, or is any pipeline waiting for approvals. You can do all these things out here as such.
But confusion is we didn't configure these notifications, right? How you got it?
Whenever you create a project, the notifications, some notifications come automatically pre-configured. You don't have to do that. Some notifications come automatically pre-configured. For example, you see here, right, this is telling when build completes, please go ahead and send this one to let's say this particular team members, and I'm a part of this particular team, so I got this email.
Okay, correct. Thank you.
All right, so that's it from mine, guys. And this weekend I'm a little bit occupied, so I won't be probably able to take a class. So we'll meet on Monday and we'll go through Azure DevOps again. Okay. And the next weekend we'll go with the administration sessions. So we have some administration sessions, and I also have one more class, so I can club both of them and I can take admin classes for it. Thank you and have a good day ahead. Thanks, guys.
We don't have class till Monday. Kiran?
I'm sorry. Sorry.
We don't have class till Monday.
Yeah, we don't have class till Monday. Saturday and Sunday we do not have a class.
Oh, Saturday. Sunday. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.